Special Prosecutor Nathan Wade has officially stepped down from the Georgia election interference case. His resignation coming just hours. Scott McAfee found that there was no actual conflict stemming from Wade's relationship with Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis, and that the prosecution of Trump and his co-defendants could continue as long as either Wade or Willis resigned. Joining us now to discuss it all is our friend Katie Phang, attorney and host of The Katie Phang Show right here on MSNBC, and our other friend, MSNBC Justice and Legal Affairs analyst Anthony Coley. Coley is a former senior advisor to Attorney General Merrick Garland.
All right.
Okay. Anthony Coley wrote a piece.
Where do we go?
Anthony Coley wrote a piece for MSNBC.com talking, and you also had some tweets, okay? And you write that without sufficient evidence that the district attorney acquired a personal stake in the prosecution. Right. We'll put it back up on the screen so people can see it. In the prosecution, you talk about Willis making a strong argument for why she should stay on the case against Trump, but she needs to remove her team, the attorney general from whom she had a the attorney from whom she had a personal relationship. You wrote this second one that we just put up months ago. Right. You said months ago that Nathan Wade got to go, Fani Willis should stay. You had some tweets yesterday that I was like, Talk to us about how you see this. Right. You yourself are not an attorney, but you advise the chief attorney of this country. How do you see this situation playing out in Georgia? Right.
So Nathan Wade, honestly, he's from all accounts he's a good dude, but his continuation on this case is a distraction. And I do want to give him credit here, Simone. Fani Willis tried to find a lot of people, Michael, to try to help her with this case. He was the one who stepped up and said yes. This is even after he had a cancer scare. And to his credit, under his leadership, they have secured 4 guilty pleas in this case. And this is the only case of the 4 major cases where there has been guilty pleas. So I give him credit for that. Now, should he have engaged in a relationship with his boss? Probably not. But at its core, the relationship did not have anything to do with the underlying effort, Trump's effort to steal an election. And secondly, there was no financial benefit here. So I wish he had stepped down earlier because this has been a 2.5-month delay, but I'm glad he did now. Now we can focus on what really matters.
But Katie, it's not just about the relationship in my estimation. It's about the perception of the relationship in the context of a very high-profile case against a former president of the United States and a lot of the politics that builds up around that. When you look at the judge's ruling, he was not polite, let's put it that way, in his assessment of the prosecutor's behavior, both of their behaviors. What was your takeaway from that moment? The politics notwithstanding, just looking at it first from a legal standpoint, that kind of reprimand, if you will, but okay, you can still play, but he got to go.
Well, the challenge that I offer you, Michael, to the question you just posed to me is I don't think that you can eliminate the politics from that question. I think they're inextricably intertwined, and the reason why I say that is I've respectfully disagreed with now Anthony and others who I think are brilliant, but here's the flaw in that logic that they have. This would have happened no matter what. Even if both Wade and Willis had said from day one we were in a relationship past tense, and that's the other important thing, that relationship was over as of last year, right? Before this case went to grand jury and was indicted for the 19 co-defendants, even if they had fallen on the sword, not like they did anything wrong, and said we had a personal relationship, I would give everything to bet that this hearing would have happened no matter what, because this is exactly what the defendants wanted to advance. And from a legal standpoint, because they raised a colorable question about disqualification, that is the reason why Judge McAfee had to conduct the hearing. But full stop. The hearing and the way within which it was conducted was done pursuant to the rules of evidence and criminal procedure. I take no umbrage with the judge when it comes to that. But when you come to the ruling itself, Michael, there is a point in the ruling about, I don't know, 8 pages in where the analysis could have stopped. forgiving maybe some of the other parts where he did an assessment of credibility later on for people like Terrence Bradley, etc. But the analysis could have stopped with there is no evidence of an actual conflict of interest because there's no evidence of any financial benefit, etc. That's when you could have had the cessation of the analysis, but not. He went further, and if you really look and you drill down at the law that he cited to for purposes of appearance of impropriety, he admits that it's really kind of dealing with personal relationships with witnesses and victims, etc., which none of us, including me, would ever disagree with him about. But that's not what the factual scenario was here. And he also goes forward in his ruling and says that this is a fact-based analysis. So if that's the case, once he heard that the defense couldn't carry its burden, that was a place for him to say, they didn't carry the burden, I'm not disqualifying. The added commentary is what taints the prosecution moving forward. The added commentary is something that I said last night, which is he says that he gave Fani Willis a chance to cure the defect. She cured it by Nathan Wade stepping down, who was the lead prosecutor on the case, second to her. But then it's really not cured because now she moves forward with a, quote, odor of mendacity on this prosecution, and that's a problem.
Well, and that is not the only shadow that is hanging over this, because it's pretty clear, Anthony, to Katie's point about the fact that the politics and the legality are inextricable. You have Comer saying he wants to subpoena Fani Willis. You have Governor Kemp signing a law reviving prosecutor sanctions panel. They smell blood in the water.
That's exactly right. And I think that case, what we're seeing here is an effort by conservatives in Georgia who are just trying to overrule the will of elected officials, particularly progressive officials. But the big picture, Fani Willis was elected by the people of Georgia, and she should be allowed to continue her work on this case. I know, Michael, you had in a comment, we were talking before the break. I'm not sure if you agree completely with that, but she should be allowed to continue.
Yeah, I guess she should at this point. I just think, though, given the nature of the intersection, as Katie and I were just talking, of politics and law, with the judiciary. Right. Wiser heads would have been, how much damage am I creating by my presence in this matter, given how it's being used to harm the prosecution of the case? And so I just think that, for me, you take the slide to the right or slide to the left, but you're not center stage.
Can I say something?
Okay,
yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
They tried to steal an election.
Right.
The former president of the United States of America and his little friends, as my mother would say, tried to steal an election. And the DA, Fani Willis, is seeking to hold them accountable.
Right.
And because she sought that accountability, they, the former president and his little friends, allies, Ashley Merchant, the attorney for one of those individuals, they then tried to distract us with salacious gossip, because that is what this is, because if there were facts, we would have found them. And it worked so much so that very well-meaning people who know a lot, lots of very smart lawyers in this country are walking around and sitting up on television being like, well, I don't know if Fani Willis can stay on this case. This was a distraction.
Right. Alvin Bragg doesn't have that problem in New York.
But this was a distraction because they haven't tried to distract him with this.
Like, they don't have anything to hang on Alvin Bragg's head.
They can make it up. They didn't have anything about Fani Willis, and I'm so animated about this. I'm sorry. I'm very animated about this because this is... We all have a duty, I think, to remind people about what this is really about. And frankly, if Fani Willis was a man named Frank, I don't believe that they would have been able to distract us with the salacious gossip about, oh, well, Frank hired Susie so that Frank could financially benefit from Susie being on the case. So it is a little sexist, it's a little racist.
Yeah, and Simone, I'm happy because you are focusing. Can I just say you are focusing us on what really matters here, right? I think about that moment when Fani Willis said, "I'm not the one who is on trial here, Katie." So what does it mean when you zoom out, Katie, for accountability for Donald Trump, who is actually the person who is on trial?
Well, like you were saying, she tried, as in Fani Willis tried to redirect the meaning of what is happening here. The role that she's taking is to make sure that accountability is not had for her, but for Donald Trump and his co-defendants that tried to steal the results and overturn the results of a lawful election in the state of Georgia. Accountability, though, is defined in so many different ways, right? You can have accountability at the ballot box, but when it comes to justice, I was just talking with one of my producers this morning about the fact that a lot of us are tired and we feel fatigue because the way that Trump has gamed the legal system looks like he's never going to see accountability the way that you and I would, and Michael and Simone and Anthony would. Like, if any of us were just Joe defendant or Jolene defendant and we went to court, we wouldn't be able to game the system like this. And I think that is why I've talked about the Trump effect. It's not just a double standard. It's an effect on the system. It's people saying, kind of like Michael just said too, right? This is such a big case. Why would you want to kind of, have a pile-on of inappropriate scrutiny or bad scrutiny on such a big case? Shouldn't you really be minding your P's and Q's so much more? Well, yeah, you should because of what's at stake. But why are we always treating him so much differently than we do any other criminal defendant? And that is a problem. And what he's done effectively is Letitia James with Alvin Bragg, with, now Fani Willis. Trump redirects the focus from him and his criminal action to things like a black woman with cash boxes in her home. Right? That's what he does. He does that effectively, and I think that what's always been an underestimation of him is that skill. That's a really good skill set when you're a criminal defendant, by the way.
And I think Anthony Coley is chomping at the bit.
Yeah, go ahead.
So
go ahead.
Here's my thing here, and Katie was absolutely right in terms of Trump redirecting. Trump is going to redirect his comments, his vitriol to anybody and everybody. It doesn't matter who sits in the seat. Right? These people are ruthless and they are focused. Do you remember this DJ Khaled song? All I do is win, 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 no matter what. That's what Donald Trump is trying to do. He's trying to win no matter what, no matter how. And it doesn't matter who sits in the seat. These people are playing dirty. They are playing for keeps. And they're not going to stop no matter if Fani Willis is the lead prosecutor or not.
Then you need to know that when you get into the ring. You need to know that when you get into the ring. And if you don't know that when you get in the ring, you're going to get punked every time.
That's right.
And that's the one thing Donald Trump has done effectively. This week he won because he's gotten everything he's wanted. A delay in every trial. And y'all need to understand that.